In today's video, I'm going to tackle a technique that a lot of people find intimidating. Hand painting. These hand painted roses are easier to make than you might think, and I'm going to walk you through it step by step. So let's get started. I'm going to start by mixing up my paints, and I'm using a white gel color as my base because I'm painting on a dark colored fondant and it's nice and opaque so it will show up. This is Bright White by Americolor. This white gel color is also going to give us a thicker paint, which we need for this technique. If we just use vodka and gel colors, we'd have a very watercolor-like paint. But this technique is based on one-stroke painting that you would use acrylic colors to do. So we really need that thicker paint. I'm also using a cake circle as my palette with a little waxy coating on it. For this design, I'm making two colors of roses. One's going to be a white rose and one's going to be a pinky colored rose. So I'll start by making two little pools of my white gel color. And for the white rose, one I'm going to leave white and the other I will tint to have a shadowy color. Then I'll make two more pools of the white that I will tint for the pink rose. For the white rose, the darker color is going to be tinted this taupe by Americolor. So I'll just add a little bit of that to one of the pools of white. And for the pink rose, I'll start by coloring the darker shade. So I'm adding a little bit of red gel color and also a little bit of fuchsia. And this is going to give the pink a little bit of a purpley tone to it. Then using any old paintbrush, I'm just going to mix up these colors, starting with the taupe, and it kind of looks like a greeny gray, but when it dries it has more of a brown tint to it. This is going to be perfect as the shadow on our white roses. You will want to keep track of what colors you're mixing to get your different shades. We can't add vodka or lemon extract to the white because it will curdle. So as we need more colors as it dries out, we're going to have to remix these paints. It won't have to be perfect and the technique is really fast, so if you mix up enough you may not have to do that at all. Now for this pink, I wanted to have more of a purpley tint, so I'm adding a little bit more fuchsia. And I like the way that looks a lot better. It's going to be perfect. Now I'll mix the lighter pink by just using the excess color on my paintbrush and mix it into that other little pool of white. And this is going to give us our nice light pink for our two-toned effect. I have already covered my cakes with a navy colored fondant. I stacked them and then I added some royal icing right at the base so it looks like a nice seamless cake. I didn't demonstrate that here because this video is already going to be quite long, but if you'd like a complete video showing all of those techniques, let me know in the comments down below and I can be sure to put something together. Now to start this cake, I'm going to first plot out where I want each of these flowers. I'm going to start loading up my brush with some of my paint and I'll start with the white roses. So I'm taking the light white color and then just a little touch of the taupe, so there's a little bit of that shadow in there. It won't really matter for this base part because it's going to be covered up. I just like to get a little bit of those tones in there. Over on the cake, I'm going to plot out the design by painting circles, and this is going to give me the shape of my flower and also the arrangement for the flowers. This design is going to have groups of 3 flowers, 2 white and 1 pink. I'm just painting the white on first and leaving space so that I can go back and add the pink ones after. I'll round out the groups with the pink circles, and then for spacing I'm also going to add some of the pink flowers all on their own so that the colors on here look balanced. I'm just going to go ahead and plot out these circles all the way up the cake. All of my circles are painted and I'm really happy with the placement and arrangement of how these flowers are going to look. But these circles need to dry completely. Since we're not working with a vodka based paint, it's not going to dry very quickly. The white gel color base really takes a while to dry and we want that completely dry before we paint over top. Otherwise the fondant can get gummy and we'll move the colors around. But what we can do in the meantime is paint on some leaves. So I'm going to make 2 little pools of my white base color again, and then I'll mix these into 2 shades of green. For the darker shade, I'm using leaf green as well as a little bit of teal, so it has kind of a bluish tint to it, and some avocado green, which makes it more of an earthy color. That's a really pretty minty color green, but not quite what I'm looking for. So I'm adding a little bit of moss green, which will give it a brown tone, and then I'll mix that in. I like the way that looks a lot better. So now I'll take a little bit of that excess green and mix it into the other pool of white to make a lighter tone. But for this leaf, I want more than just the shadow and light color, so I want to change the shade a bit. To do that, I'm adding some lemon yellow. Mixing that in, I think it needs a bit more yellow. And maybe I added a bit too much of that yellow, so I'm adding a little bit of that moss green to it to try and dull it down. And I really like the way that looks. It's kind of a mustardy green, and I think these 2 greens are going to look really pretty together. For this painting technique, I'm using a flat brush with some pretty stiff bristles. This is based off of a 1-stroke painting like I had said before. So I'm loading up my brush with the light and dark colors and I'll blend them together a little bit. And then go over to the cake. I'm going to place leaves around this grouping of 3 flowers in all of the little gaps there. When placing my leaves, I want to keep in mind that I need to paint the things that are further away first. So if I want to layer my leaves, I have to start with ones that will be in the background. To paint these leaves, I'm using my brush with the darker color facing in. You press down at an angle, swoop out a little bit, and release pressure as you get to the top, and that's going to come to a point. Then flip the brush around, keeping that darker color towards the center, and do the same thing on the other side. And that's a leaf. Painting with the white gel color is not quite like using acrylic paints with a 1-stroke painting technique, but we can apply a lot of the same principles to get a really easy decorative floral pattern. So now I'm going to continue around the cake, adding leaves to all of my pre-plotted groups of flowers. Now that all of those leaves are painted, we want to give all of this base painting a really good chance to dry completely. It will depend on your climate how quickly that will happen. Here it's going to take about half an hour. We want to make sure it's fully dry before moving forward. Now everything is completely dry. Off camera I went ahead and layered on some more leaves where I wanted to layer a little group. And the circles are fully dry, all those leaves are fully dry, so now we can bring the detail to our flowers. I mixed plenty of my colors up so they won't dry out while I'm working. And I'm going to start with the lighter flowers first, using my flat brush, load up with the lighter color, add a touch of the darker, and blend them together. And now we can add the petals. With my brush loaded, I'm going to first start with the outer petals of all the flowers because they would be towards the back, they're further away. I'm going to start with this flower here, And to make the petals, you always want the darker shade facing towards the center of the flower, so you'll need to move your brush around as you move around the edge of the flower. So using the flat brush and overlapping the edge of that circle just a little bit, you're going to want to put the brush down and press down. As you move to the side, give it a little bit of a wiggle so there's some movement, and release pressure as you pull up, and that's going to give it a pretty curve. As you can see, it's really easy to make these flower petals. Moving on to the next petal, and I'm going to do the same thing right next to it. Give it a little wriggle and release pressure, and it makes it look curved. Now some of the petals are going to be a little bit shallower, so it looks like some are petals that you're looking straight on towards or that might be curled a little bit, and then the wider ones look more flat. So here I'll make a more shallow petal, so I'm not putting too much pressure. I'll release up as I drag, and it makes it look like a curved petal that you're looking straight on towards. Next, I'll turn my brush so the darker shade is facing in, and I'll work around the other side. And already you can see the flowers are taking shape. Now I'll just go to all of those circles I plotted and add the outer petals to each flower. This is not a perfect painting technique. These roses will not look like a perfect flower, so just have fun with it. It all comes together in the end, I promise. When I get to the pink flowers, I'm going to load up my brush the same way with mostly the lighter shade and just a touch of the darker shade, and again blend them together, and that darker shade will always face towards the center of the flower. I painted these flowers all the way up the cake, and now I need to make sure that everything is fully dry. It should be by about the time you finish the whole 3 tiers. If it's not, give it extra time. And now we'll finish off these flowers by painting the inner petals. So starting with this white flower again, I'm going to paint first a couple of petals that would be towards the back of the flower. And it's the same technique, just on a little smaller, tighter scale as we did for the outer petals. And because we're working pretty quickly, I'm going to go right in to do the center petals that form a little spiral. So with my brush loaded, first I'm putting the bristle tips down. I'm going to slightly press and make an upside down U. Then in the center of that, I'm going to slightly press again and make a right side up U that goes outside of that first edge. And you make a little spiral that looks like the center of a rose. Once you have that, you can go in and add a few more petals as needed around it just to finish off the flower. Depending on how quickly you can work, you may want to work in stages again and let the layers dry, but I'm just going to add the centers all at once. It will get a little bit messy because I'll be pushing those colors around as the fondant is a little bit wet, but we're going to add some highlights at the end. It's all going to come together and look beautiful. Now at this point, after all of the petals are painted, let it dry completely. Then we're going to go in and add some highlights using just the white gel color and a thin little round brush. With my brush loaded, I'm just going to highlight the edge of each of the petals. I'm using the white on both the white roses and those pink roses. It's going to make a really pretty highlight that really defines each petal. And that's it. This hand-painted cake came out so beautifully. It's one of my favorite cakes that I've made in quite a while. I hope you give this technique a try. If you do, leave me a comment down below and let me know how you made out. And if you want to share a photo, I'd love to see it on my Facebook page. Stay tuned for next week's video where I'll show you how to make these wafer paper roses that are perfect to embellish this hand-painted cake. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new videos, and be sure to click the little bell icon and turn on post notifications so you're notified every time I upload.